through y'all help me not these verses need here in a minute. But what we're going to talk about, of course, already studied about the Tower of Babel, okay, chapter 11. So we're going back a little bit, and we're looking at what happened at the generation. So first and foremost, I'll say it again, and I've said it many times, help us. What different? We didn't come from the same people. We came from Noah. Noah and his only flood. Whatever DNA was out there on the face of the earth, it all died with the flood. And Noah and sons and daughters. There we're picking up what the generations of the sons of Noah. Ham, and Japheth. Now, obviously, we know they were, so we have didn't name. To the Magog, some of these names are going to be familiar. You might not be able to put your finger on the scripture. Okay, we don't have to. But some of them familiar. Yeah, Gog and Magog, right? And then the sons of let's give us the sons of the sun now, the grandchildren. The sons of that one. When Jonah was fleeing to the Lord, he was going Kittim, Dodanim, and from the coastlands, people spread by these, each to his own language. And so you can see that this is the entire Bible coming, but it's saying that this is kind of how these people groups were going to be moved to the Tower of Babel. And the infinite wisdom exactly how to do what I call the mishmash. You know, there's one everything, we're going to build this Bible and everything. God said, I'm not going to do that, so mishmashed everybody. Some of them, others that talked a little bit like enough by started coagulating together, right? Those did understand what Donnie was saying. In the room they could. So they started together, and then so the man that without going into a bunch of they're sometimes include the cities or regions established. So we have a lot of detail today because it would be really impossible to try to figure and outside who, where, and did what, because it just doesn't give us from that. So, you know, when you try to get down into the nitty gritty, and I don't know, I want to beleaguer you guys if you're not into geography, into came they got this isn't going to be all meaningful to you to see that all of this popular earth that starts after this came from Noah and his three sons. That Lily Pond. Yeah. So, you know, that's not a name you hear a lot, right? Like Calhoun or Redbud or Sonoraville or some of these other communities, but there it is. Pine Log. You know, you can drive through Pine Log and not even know you did it. These names can change. The sons of Cush, Sheba, Havilah, Sapta, Ramah, Saplicah. The sons of Ramah was Sheba and Dedan. Dedan is still there. Cush fathered Nimrod. Y'all heard of Nimrod? He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And then we're going to come back. What is known as Canaan, all right, or Palestine as we know it today, is telling you geographically where some of these folks are going. From that land, he went into Assyria. So where's Assyria at? Does anybody know that, where Assyria is today on the present map? It is a portion of Syria and Iraq, but we have a nation called Syria. That was the heart of the Assyrian kingdom. And that's still here today. And built Nineveh. So where would you expect to find Nineveh? In Iraq. Rehoboth, Caleb, Rezin, between Nineveh and Calah, and that is the great city. Egypt fathered Ludum, Anamite, Lahavim, Nethaphim. That's a lot of, you like my pronunciations? Patharizium, Caslum, from whom the Philistines came. So you've got an idea where that area is geographically. Canaan fathered Sidon, and his firstborn Heth, and the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Archites, the Sinites, the Arphadites, the Samarites, and the Hashematites. And afterwards the clans of the Canaanites dispersed. I can see why. I tease our Logan families that are here many times with Steve and them, because I call them the Loganites, the 13th tribe of Israel, because they had a big family. A big family. And I would call them the Loganites. So that's a lot of information about who fathered who. Some of these cities, you know, Sidon became a city later on. The Jebusites, you've heard, some of these others. And here's what's always tricky for all of us, isn't it? Or at least it is for me. To try to figure out, when you're reading the Old Testament, right? There were two different kinds of battles going on all the time in the Old Testament. One was among themselves. All the people in Canaan, all the people in present-day Israel fighting among themselves. The Israelites would go fight the Amorites. And they were all right there together, right? Even within the family of Abraham, later they fought each other. The children of Samaria were the children of Abraham. And yet they hated the Jews that were in Jerusalem. The truth is, they were both Jews. But they were Samaritan Jews. And they had their own temple that was not the temple in Jerusalem to worship at. And so they had constant battles. And you'll hear it talk about the king of Israel, that's the other 10 kingdoms, and the king of Judah. And they would battle each other. So the truth is they're all having all-out war with their own kinfolk. All the way through the Old Testament. That's what you see all the time in there. You know, some of us can't get along with our own kinfolk. Some of us come to blows. Now, we don't kill each other, praise God, for the most part, I don't think. But, you know, sometimes it's hard to get along with our kinfolk, isn't it? Well, man, that's what was happening here with all these divided nations that were taking place. In the territory of the Canaanites extended beyond Sidon in the direction of Gerar and as Gaza, and in the direction of Sodom, Gomorrah. Anybody knows where that is, right? On a map. So you know that land of that territory they were going into, Admah, Zebium, and as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham by their clans, by their languages, their lands, and their nations. To Shem they fathered also Eber. You've heard of Eber, Japheth. The children were born, the sons of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, Aram. The sons of Aram, Uz, Hul, Jether, Mash. Y'all going to be tested on this later. Arphaxad and fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Ether. Who was Eber's father? Okay, I'm going to have to go through the whole genealogy again, okay? To Eber was born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg. Y'all remember hearing about Peleg, right? For in his days the earth was divided, and the father's brother's name was Joktan. I always wanted to name a kid Joktan. It just sounds like a cool name. You know, I don't know how it go over in school classroom. Joktan Gay, are you here? Yeah. It just ain't the same. Joktan fathered Alamadad, Shepheleth, Hazmarath, Jerah, Hadaram, Uzal, Tikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, Jobab. That's another good one too. Jobab, get in here. All these were the sons of Joktan. The territory in which they lived extended from Mizah in the direction of Sephar into the hill country to the east. These are the sons of Shem by their clans, their languages, their lands, their nations, and these are the clans of the sons of Noah according to their genealogies and their nations. From these nations spread abroad into all the earth after the flood. And then what I'm going to give you this, and I'm going to go through it, and I ain't going to say a lot about it, but if you were so inclined to want to understand the time factor of what we just went through, it's telling us how we can calculate that. These are the generations of Shem. When Shem was 100 years old, he fathered Arphaxad 2 years before the flood. 2 years before the flood. After the flood. So we can tell how old Shem was, 100 years old, and how old Arphaxad was in reference to the flood year, right? And Shem lived and fathered Arphaxad 500 years and had other sons and daughters. So how old was Shem total? 600 years. When Arphaxad lived 35 years, he fathered Shelah. And Arphaxad lived after he fathered Shelah 403 years, and he had other sons and daughters. And when Shelah had lived 30, he fathered Eber. We talked about him a minute ago. Shelah lived after he fathered Eber 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Eber had lived 34 years, he fathered Peleg. We just talked about him. Eber lived after he fathered Peleg 430 years and had other sons and daughters. And let me just clarify one thing real quickly about the Peleg. For many years, because I had read this in a commentary, y'all get this? I had read this in a commentary, and it just made sense to me that when it was talking about in the days of Peleg, the nations were divided, that I was thinking that was the separation of the continents. What this study has revealed to me and helped me understand, because the timing was off about that. If that had happened during the lifetime of Peleg, whether he was 5 years old or whatever age, you would have thought that somewhere in this Genesis narrative here, it would have talked about the cataclysmic changes of the earth that took place when you separated the tectonic plates. But there's no incline to that. The only thing where that makes any real logical and science understanding would have been during the cataclysmic flood. When he opened the fissures of the earth, the depths of the earth that holds the aquifers that are under the ground open, it was in this separation of these continents that all this was taking place. A couple of things were going to happen then. You separate many of these continents, and although they are big, right, like Australia or like South America and these other continents of the earth, now they're surrounded by water that is going to be coming in and covering the earth instead of one big land mass to be swallowed up by the water. And a lot of things happened then. So Peleg, what it's really probably referring to is that during the days of Peleg is when the separations of the languages took place. And that this is when the Tower of Babel was happening. And this is when the people started doing exactly what God told them to do. Remember, we talked about obedience is better than your sacrifices. You know, be obedient to God and what he tells us to do. And he told them to go and repopulate the earth. Well, they didn't do that. They all hung out in the same valley, had the same language. Let's build this big tower. And God said, that ain't the way this is going to work. I'm going to make you separate. And he did it by changing their tongues. Tongue plays a very important part scripturally in the Bible throughout both the Old and the New Testament. So in this, it's kind of giving us where some of these Cush, son of Ham's, went down into this area. Elam, son of Shem, Madai, son of Japheth, and his went, there's the Tigris River, Euphrates. This right up in here is Iraq, present-day Iraq. Of course, you know where Egypt is over here, Saudi Arabia over here, Persian Gulf. Then you get up into Greece and up in there, and many of Japheth's people went into what is present-day Europe from that place. So let me ask you a few things about how you think that went down, because it's going to become important here in a moment when we talk about these guys. Cavemen. Anybody know anything about cavemen? Anybody got a man cave at your house? See, you ain't that far removed. You see, you think, but you call it a man cave. And ladies, what does a man cave represent? Neanderthal. He's acting like a Neanderthal, she says. And he's going in there in his little zone with a big screen TV and NFL football, and he's got to have a mini fridge with some Coca-Colas in it. I said Coca-Colas. Okay? But most people, when we think of these in the context that the world sees them, here's what they kind of paint them as. These were just a bunch of ignorant people. They weren't very smart intellectually, and what science will tell you is that their brain was not fully developed yet. You know, they were kind of like part monkey, part human. Their brain just hadn't got there yet. Does that fit with the description that God gives you in the Bible of Noah and his sons?
No.
Do you think Noah's sons were ignorant people?
No.
But you see, when they had to leave, how do you think they got from the Tower of Babel into Iraq? How do you think? You think they got on a speed bullet train? How do you think they got there?
Most people think they followed food sources.
Okay, they may have followed food sources. Certainly you would have wanted to follow water sources, right? And what we understand today in that desert. It may not have looked that deserty then, right? Immediately after the flood. It may have been lush and green for all I know. But they were walking by foot. At best, they might have had a cow. I don't think they had domesticated horses yet, but they may have had a cow that could pull some rudimentary cart. But many of them wouldn't have had cows. They would have just had basically the clothes on their back and whatever few essentials, baskets and things they could take with them. And what do you think they would have used for shelter? Yeah, which would be what? Caves. So that doesn't sound like an ignorant person to me. If I was out somewhere trying to get out of a freezing rain in the higher elevations or someplace like that, I think I'd be looking for a cave today. I mean, you know, you got some people that could, you know, go build them a little lean-to shelter out of some evergreens, you know, some of this wilderness tactics we hear of today. You know, some of them may have done that. They may have been like the Bedouins that we know that still exist today. Maybe they just had sheepskin and cowskin cloth tents that they just put up and tear down and move, and put up and tear down and move, and put up and tear. If you did a cave, you're kind of tied to that cave, ain't you? Then you're going to get comfortable and you're going to get scared and you're not going to want to move anymore. But the rest of the clan's moving. The people that talk like you are still moving. So we paint them like this, but you know what's weird about how they talk about how ignorant these people are? And then they find these cave drawings that don't look too ignorant at all. They can draw a guy on a horseback with a spear taking down a mammoth elephant or giraffes or zebras. And I mean, they're painting all of this stuff on these walls with charcoal. They're using different colored paints. You know, and yet they say, oh, they were really super ignorant. The people that left, if you're going to believe the biblical record, and I hope you do, the people that left Babel had just built a tower. A tower that was extremely tall. Remember, I showed you some of the ziggurats of the world where people all over the world in different cultures had built towers. And you know what's amazing? I tried to do a little research, and I'm not saying it's 100%, so don't get me wrong, okay? Don't go out of here saying Paul said, okay? But I did a little digging, and I couldn't think of, and I couldn't find anybody that had built any type of monumental structure, any kind of structure that you might say is one of the wonders of the world. Is the pyramids one of the wonders of the world? Yeah. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon is a wonderful thing, right? These things you find down in Chichen Itza, Mexico, these huge ziggurats that were built, and they're so precise with the equinox, it's unnerving how precise they are. Doesn't sound like ignorant people to me that over the course of 500 years, Donnie, me and you can get everybody along good enough, and we're not going to live the whole 500 years, but to build a project, keep it going, and when it's finished 500 years from now, it's so exact that you can measure it with a scale of inches. To me, that sounds pretty complex.
National Geographic said that those people right there, the way they will be able to do things like that is because an alien came down.
Oh, yeah, I would rather believe in an alien than God. So, yeah, it couldn't. But how many scientific towers do you know that were built just for science? How many were built for religious reasons? You see, that ought to tell us something, but we're not going to accept that possibility because we can't accept religion as having a place in science. They could build something so astronomically precise that even our scientists have to agree to it, but they did it for religious reasons. Maybe not the same religious reasons that we have, but they had something in their psyche that talked about a greater individual, a God. They had all different concepts of who this God might be, but most of them all agreed there was one up there. In that astros out there. Somewhere, somehow, they didn't understand it, and the truth is you don't either today. Understand exactly how God lives in the habitat of the heavens. I know what it tells us in the Bible, that with the span of his hand, he measures the universe. That sounds like a pretty big God to me. And these people had built a city. So they weren't ignorant people. When they got to these new locations, they understood how to do things. Now, I got to move on. I told you all to help me, and you're not doing a bit. So we're going to go to Acts chapter 17. This is what the New Testament says about the same topic. The God who made the world and everything in it, being the Lord of the heaven and the earth, did not live in the temples made by men. See, we can build these beautiful Ephesus, and I'm telling you, God don't live at Crane Eater. Okay? He don't live at Sonorville Baptist. He don't live in any of these beautiful churches that are around us or in this world. He don't live in the Vatican. God doesn't live in temples made by man. Nor is he served by human hands as if he needs anything. A song that I hear real, and I don't know who sings it, don't get me, but one of the verses sticks out to me. He says, I didn't build you up, God, so I can't let you down. Right? People are worried about letting God down. You can't build him up. Okay? He's not served by human hands as if he needs anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man. Do you believe it? See, I told you in the Old Testament. Now this is the New Testament. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the earth, on all of the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries for their dwelling places, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Why would they have to feel their way? Why would they have to do this? Y'all just looking at me. Come on, help me out. Why would you be feeling like this? You're blind, but what was blinding you? Your eyes were good. You had 20/20 vision. You lived in darkness. And God's not in the darkness. He's in the light. The Bible says he is the light. He is the light of the world. We were all groping around in the darkness of sin until we saw the light. Some brother or sister shared with you the light of the world in Jesus Christ. He said we were all just groping around, that we should seek God and perhaps feel our way toward him and find him, yet he is actually not far from any one of us. Y'all played them silly games, right, in the blacked out room. You go into a cave. Go to Mammoth Cave, Kentucky. They're going to take you down in there. Brother Donnie, you've been there, hadn't you? You've been in Mammoth Cave? Any cave? You've been in any cave at all, Donnie? Okay, good. So did they turn the lights on you down there? No lights to start, but you took a light in. What'd you do that for? Okay, what happened when the light went out? But I mean, if it did went out, why were you afraid of it going out? You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. That's when it gets dark, It's dark. And you couldn't see anything in that darkness. And what you couldn't see was the friend right next to you within arm's reach. And that's the way God was. The whole time we were goofing around in sin, He was within arm's reach of us and we didn't know it. We couldn't see Him in the darkness of sin until He revealed Himself to us as the God of light. For in Him we live and move and have our being, even as some have their own poets have said, for we are indeed His offspring. And it says, and the man called his wife's name Eve because she was what? The mother of all living. 1 Peter said, because they formerly did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 people, were brought safely through the water. This is what makes you different. This is what we all still get hung up on in 2022 world, not just America, the whole world, is this scientific name. What is that? Melanin. You probably wouldn't know it if you saw it in its true form. But what you do see is the different levels of that in your body's skin color. So I told you this before, right? You're not, these are labels that people, men, women, have put on people for reasons that are not godly. Because they call you a white person. That's white. You see that? Lay your hand on that table in front of you. That table's white. Who has a hand that matches the table? Because we're going to get you medical help right now. Who's got one? Does anybody in this room hand match the table? No, it does not. You're not white. You know what you are at best? Brown. Beigey brown. Let's eggshell. No, I don't care. This is students from Washington International Primary School in Washington, D.C. You see this cute little blue-eyed, blonde-haired girl down here? She's not white either, because if you'll notice right beside her and around her head, that's a white background. And you can still see her. So she didn't just blend into the wall. She's got a level of melatonin in her body that makes her a very, very, very light brown. At the other end of the spectrum is this young person here that has a lot of that melanin in them that makes them very, very dark brown. We want to call them black. The truth is there's very few of them that you could really put up against the true color of black. They're really a really super dark brown. Many of these, after the sons of Shem and Noah, the sons of Noah dispersed, many of these would have grouped together. One of the reasons in the very early years you would have saw people in Europe being what they used to call light-skinned people of Europe versus the dark-skinned people of Egypt, Africa, Canaan, Iraq, the Middle East, that have darker. You know, if you go into the Middle East, you go to Israel, most of the Israelites, many of the Israelites have very dark brown skin and jet black hair. Anybody that's been there, you know that to be true, right? If I go to Japan, I got the same jet black hair on almost everybody. When I went to Japan one time, I was standing on a train, and I could identify every European on the train because we were standing 3.5 feet taller than everybody else on the train. You can look all the way through 3 cars and see a guy down there. If you think you're going to go hide in Japan as a European, you're not going to do it. And they all have black hair. But what else do they have that makes them unique? And it's not yellow skin either. Their eyes have a slant to them. And that's also, if you say, well, that's just a Japanese thing, it's also an Alaskan thing. It's also some of our own Native Americans had some of those same eye traits. So I wanted to... I know, but... Yeah, that's what they do. Yeah, exactly. See, he is so smart. That's why I like having him in here. So I want to go someplace. If you'll just give me just a minute. Hopefully it's still there. Y'all look at this. Can you see this yet? Say yes. Oh, help me out. This is the National Human Genome Research Institute, funded by your tax dollars and mine. It's a completely 115% scientific website. It is run by scientists, owned by scientists, led by scientists, operated by scientists. All the tests were conducted by scientists. Y'all, I don't know if y'all get all that yet, do you? Can you see that right there? Can y'all read that? Okay. Let me read it for you. Let me see if, can I see if I can make it bigger for you? Can you see it now? Somebody read that to me.
All human beings are 99.9% identical in their genetic makeup. Differences in the remaining 0.1 or 1/10% hold important clues about the causes of diseases.
Who's your kinfolk in the room?
Everybody.
You're just like me, 99.9%. Per the scientist. This isn't a biblical teaching out of some seminary. But I just told you you all came from Noah. Isn't it amazing that you might have DNA that is only 0.01% different than the people all around us? Okay. 0.1 on the whole earth. On the whole earth. Every level of melatonin within your body on the whole earth, and you're 99.9% like the Muslims, like the Egyptians, like the Germans. You are, I am, because we all came from Noah. One blood, and there's only one race. There is the human race, of which you are 99.9%, according to them, exactly like everybody else on this earth. That's how your God operates. What's different and what we got to train ourselves, especially as Christians, you are not an object of division. The Bible wants you to unify people under the banner of Jesus Christ. Not divide us more asunder, but to embrace all these other different ethnicities. They're the same race, but they have a different ethos. They have a different ethnicity. Their cultures, their eye slants, some of those minor changes is their ethnicity, not their race. There's only one race, the human race. We have one blood. And if you cut, let's see, who do I want to cut? Who volunteers to be cut this morning? You know, we can cut my sister Laura, and then I got to cut somebody else. Because I want to show you the blood's the same. We think they're a completely different animal because their skin color's darker than ours, and they all bleed just like we do. Their veins are blue just like ours are blue. What we see are perceived to be blue in your arm when you see that. Theirs is too. The only reason you can see it more in that little blonde-headed lady at the end is because of the tone of the melanin of the skin on top. But if you go have a doctor peel that back, you know what color that vein's going to be? Exactly the same. Because you're 99.9% the same. And we as Christians got to get our mentality on that. Amen? God bless you. Hope you got something from this lesson today. Thank you. Y'all are so kind.